Welcome to another Creative Podcast, where creative outcasts come together to share their stories so we can all feel a little less lonely. I'm your host, Janelle Marquez. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of another Creative Podcast. I always knew I wanted to make it to episode 20. I didn't think it'd take this long. I also am really proud of myself for still getting to episode 20 when multiple times this year I have just felt like maybe I should just leave it as is. But one thing about me is that I'm incredibly stubborn and I don't give up very easily. So here's to those who continue to show up for themselves and to constantly try and get back up every time you feel like you've been knocked down. Today's episode is one that I have had actually written on this whiteboard that's actually behind me. It's an idea that was going to be eventually made and talked about in newer episodes, but I've thought a lot about this topic and its relevance to my life, and I thought it would be the perfect conversation to wrap up the first 20 episodes of this season. So today we are just gonna dive in and talk about the idea of being an artist in the modern age. I feel like I need to disclose this and let it be very clear that I've had the privilege of being able to be an artist in the modern day. I grew up in a time where the people who had the opportunities to exist as an artist were very few and in between. But then if you are also in your mid-20s in the year of 2025, actually I'm in my late 20s, but you would also know that times have changed, and now people who have nothing are making hundreds and thousands of dollars online just by being creators. And I think this is something that is just so cool to live and see, because I mean, how could you not say it's so cool to see people, anyone, just an average person who has a little bit of willpower in them, a little bit of consistency within them, to be able to turn their lives around simply just by creating on the internet. I think it's a really cool world we live in. I think it's a really cool time to be alive in that sense, but I also think there is still so much that isn't being talked about when it comes to being an artist in today's day and age. And I think these are the realities that just really need to be shared, because for so many of us, we are only seeing those who've made it in this industry. And this podcast stemmed from honest conversations with other creators in my industry and other artists in my industry, or like similar industries. And I think the more we have these conversations, the easier it is for us to kind of navigate the world as artists. So let's talk about what the idea of an artist has been throughout history, because it hasn't always been the same. Especially as someone who grew up in the 2000s, I really felt like an outsider being a creative. I knew people who were also creative like me, and we had similar passions and interests, but I never felt like it was something that I was going to have a career in. I just didn't think it was realistic for me to ever have a life where I made money off of my art. I just didn't see that for myself. I just didn't think it was possible for someone like me who grew up in a middle-class family, who really valued education and working a job that was realistically going to provide you a living. But that never stopped me from pursuing all my creative endeavors, and I'm really grateful for that, because my parents really encouraged that of me from a young age. My dad let me steal his, point and shoot camera to post on YouTube as a 10-year-old. And he let me steal his video camera to start up my YouTube channel. And my mom never hesitated to take me to my dance classes and to show up to my dance performances. But I know that's only true for very few other creatives. I'm just one of the lucky ones. And my parents never made me feel like I was crazy for wanting to pursue any and all creative endeavors, even to this day. But growing up, when you talked about being an artist, it was usually met with this perception of an artist is someone who is either broke, desperate, delusional, or on the other hand, an artist is someone who comes from money, who has the resources. And I feel like I have fallen victim to those beliefs growing up. And I never even classified myself as an artist until maybe I was about 17 years old, maybe 16 even. I knew I was creative, but I would have never called myself an artist or a creator. Because also, I felt like an artist was somebody who like drew or made music or played an instrument. I never saw that as myself. But there's also another type of artist that I think a lot of us are more familiar with, and that's the idea of a starving artist. If you're not familiar with that concept or that trope, it's just this idea of an artist who sacrifices their well-being when it comes to finances, so financial well-being, in order to pursue their career. That goes hand in hand with the stereotype of like an artist being broke. It's because they want to pursue the thing they love so badly, even though it makes them no money or it's not lucrative or going anywhere. Yeah, that is the idea of a starving artist. And I feel like this is what, if I'm being quite honest, I felt this way when I first realized I could make money off of my craft, which was photography. And I really felt like this was the only way I could really be an artist, was to be broke and try pursuing something. But times have changed, and with the evolution of social media within the last 10 years, I realized one does not have to be a starving artist. And that is so true for so many people. And it's really awesome to see artists and creators and fellow creatives getting paid a reasonable income, which just was not normal 10, 15 years ago. And I guess you could say like my one bone to pick about this trope and this whole, concept of being a starving artist is that it romanticizes suffering. And I have 2 points to make on this. The first one is that I think in this day and age, this is still a problem. And I think it's a big one because the idea of a starving artist is that like you're willing to suffer so badly to make your art succeed. And in society, we have normalized that, and we have kind of made it the norm for artists to suffer in order to be able to make a name for themselves as an artist. And I think that's really damaging because it puts a lot of artists in unsafe situations, keeps them in toxic relationships, and all that just leads to a very negative experience and something that one will have to heal from eventually if they choose to. But I'm here to say I don't think that is a necessary stepping stone or like something artists need to go through in today's day and age. I think if you're an artist and you're suffering, it's not a good thing. I don't think it's something to brag about, and I think it's something we should really stop normalizing. I could kind of go deeper into this, but I also don't want to get stuck down this rabbit hole, but those are my 2 cents on that. I think another trope that's a little bit more recognizable but not really talked about in today's society is also the idea of a tortured artist or a tortured poet. Last year, Taylor Swift released the Tortured Poets Department, and while it sounds poetic and it was a way for Taylor Swift to kind of get a little bit real and more raw about things, I don't love the idea of romanticizing this idea of a tortured poet. Is even she has kind of romanticized this idea of suffering. Even though suffering is a shared feeling amongst people, I don't think it's something everyone should have to experience or go through in order to be able to connect with others. Throughout history, a tortured artist is like an artist or a creative who is usually constantly like tormented or battling like a mental illness, or they're just simply severely depressed. And an example of this would be like Kurt Cobain, Edgar Allan Poe. I think even Van Gogh was also another one, if I'm not mistaken. But there's this idea that, some of the best artists to exist are tortured artists. And once again, because of the level of fame a lot of these people have reached and their position in society, there is still this like glamorizing that one must experience pain and agony in order to create such great things. But I think the modern day creative is much more simpler and much lighter, as it should be, because to be honest, the world is really dark as it is, and I think we need people to create what we wish there to be more of in the world, and my hope for that is just good, positive, thought-provoking things. However, I feel like I want to throw in my own idea or trope of an artist that I'm making up. I don't know if this actually exists or not. So I'm making this up. Maybe if it does exist, let me know if someone's already talked about this. But I want to talk about like the modern day tortured artist, and I would classify myself as one. So now, what is the modern day tortured artist? I will tell you. The modern day tortured artist is one who loses their mind due to the constant noise of their work, or simply one who has just never recovered from burnout. I feel like that is what I have been for the last year. It's not that I have any pain and suffering and agony I'm experiencing and then making art from. I mean, I guess I could say I'm also like an old time tortured artist, because that's how this podcast kind of came about. But anywho, this modern day tortured artist, I think there's so much more of us, unfortunately. And a lot of us don't even realize that's what we're suffering from until we're like deep up in it. So take what you want from that, or take none of it. I will say, like, when it comes to the idea of a starving artist, a tortured artist, I think one thing all artists in general, whether you're one of those or you don't identify as any of them, I think one thing that we all kind of have in common is that we're able to create things that either express how we feel, and or we're able to create things that evoke shared emotions amongst one another. And I think it's such a beautiful thing to be able to do that, because whether you are a starving artist or a tortured artist, these are still vessels that allow us to create. And isn't that such a beautiful thing? I actually remember a couple years ago, almost 10 years ago, I was going through a really dark time, and I was recovering from burnout and being a perfectionist. And I spent the whole year after that just kind of shutting everyone out. I cut off my two best friends. I got involved in the wrong crowds and made a lot of really, really bad decisions. And almost exactly to the year, I realized that I was continuing down a path where I was just closed off. And I wanted to just let everyone in kind of on what I was doing. But for some reason, it felt easier to do that with strangers than it did my own inner circle or like my close friends. So I was in an English class my second semester of sophomore year. And we had to write personal essays, and I wrote a personal essay talking about everything I was going through, all the horrible stuff. I didn't care if 15 strangers in my class paid attention. They were never going to see me again after the end of the semester. So I did that, and we had to recreate or reformat one of our essays from the year into another piece of media. And I chose to do that personal letter and turn it into a short film. I made a short film that still lives on my YouTube channel. If you want to watch, I will link it. But this ended up being like a phone call to a friend, or like a voicemail to a friend, kind of catching them up on where I've been. And I remember posting this to my YouTube channel, like as a link, so I could share it with my class and professor. And I had uploaded it, and I shared it to my class one day. Like I uploaded the night before, shared it to my class in the morning. And one thing I did not realize I did was that when I uploaded the video, it was actually public and not set private. And when I left my English class that morning, my phone was blown up with just nothing but super kind messages. And I was so confused. Like, what are other people contacting me about? And turns out that people who subscribed to my channel, which were a couple of my close friends, had already seen the video, and they were responding so positively to the point where I was like, oh, I was not expecting this many people to become aware all at the same time of some of the deepest, darkest days I've lived in the last year. And it was so scary and it was so terrifying to put that out there. But I did not regret it because I had never felt so connected with the people around me again. And after that, to this day, I have continued to upload content on my YouTube channel that talks about my struggles with my mental health, because it is just something I have dealt with my entire life, and I will continue to advocate for those to get help or to slow down and to listen and to just take care of your mental well-being, because that is what we are responsible for doing. No one else in our lives is. And as an artist, as a creative, I feel like if I can find a way to share my story, no matter what the medium is, I almost feel like it's like my duty to do so. So that's what I continue to do. And yeah, that is an example of me being a tortured artist, but also that was just one moment that helped carve the path of the kind of artist I wanted to be. I didn't know it at the time, but it's had such an impact on my life up until this day, and I don't regret putting myself out there. Even if that gives someone the right to call me a tortured artist. Sue me. Anywho. Now, what's it like being an artist in the modern day? Well, it is not easy, and it's really something that's actually hard to continue to do if one chooses to pursue it. But I kind of like to keep things a little concise on this podcast, or I'm trying to be a little bit more concise on this podcast. So I'll leave you guys with a couple pros and cons of what it's like to be an artist in the modern day. Quickly, here are some pros. We live in a society that is more accepting of being an artist and making a living off being an artist and sharing that you're an artist. So if you've been looking at pursuing an artistic career or any of those things, I highly, highly, highly recommend doing so, because now is the time. Now more than ever. I will also say that one of the coolest things about being an artist in today's modern day era is that you're in charge of your own career or the path that you want to go to, or like whatever creative endeavor you'd like to have. You have a choice. And that hasn't always been the case for most people or creatives that came before us. Another cool thing about being creative in today's day and age is that you get to do what you love. You get to document it, you get to share it, you get to sit in it and be proud of it, and you get to spend time doing something that brings you joy. And how is that not so cool? Here are a couple cons though. Artists are still underpaid and underappreciated in today's day and age. Artists get lowballed all the time because people just don't value the work and the process of what it takes to be an artist. And I just feel like that's rarely ever going to change, if I'm just putting it out there. Being an artist, one thing that you have to accept is that there's not many stable careers in the industry. And in most industries, a lot of the times you have to have money behind what you do. And a lot of places just don't want to put money behind paying artists. And that means that there are not many careers that are stable and allow you to make a livable income. Another thing that's also a con is that burnout is usually inevitable. It will happen. It does happen, but you can recover from it if you choose to. It is just going to be a mental battle, because working as an artist, you're still working, but you're also still an artist. Overall, when it comes to being an artist in the modern day, it's really something that I think is like a high risk, high reward thing. It's also not something you have to pursue as a career. I'm just putting that out there. You can always be an artist and exist as one without getting paid. You could simply just create and exist amongst everyone else, and that is perfectly okay. In fact, I actually think that's the best way, but that's because I've been a little burned from the industry. You know, and it's going to always present its own set of challenges, no matter whether you work in the industry as an artist, or you're just an artist creating for themselves, you're always going to face challenges, and you're also going to be the only one who can face them and overcome them. So sit with that if you'd like. But to all my fellow creatives out there, I want to remind you that being an artist in the modern day is beautiful. It's incredible, and you should be so proud to be able to call yourself an artist. And I have met the most lovely people who are artists, and I'm really grateful for that. Being an artist is something that no one can take away from you. No one can take away your brain, your creativity. That's all you. And you should be very proud of it. But that's kind of all I have for you guys today. I kind of rambled. I kind of just needed to get it out there. We can talk about this again some other time, but I will leave you guys with all this for now, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.